Hey everybody, welcome to South by Southwest. Welcome to the SDG Media Zone. I'm Johanna, I'm from Ogilvy Health, and here with a fabulous panel to talk about youth and health in the 21st century. So to my immediate left is the fabulous Bruce Reynolds from Dentsu Aegis, one of the largest marketing and advertising companies on the planet. Apart from WPP, no friendly, just friendly rivalry. Liv Langdon, who's Austin-based local health and wellness consultant and has a very popular blog and website, which is fantastic. I recommend it highly. And Paige Pressley, who is a legitimate star chef. Barack Obama follows him on Twitter, and a health and wellness and nutrition consultant. So we have a hot panel. So let's start, if I may, with an icebreaker and say that according to the UN, half the world's population is under 30. So I've been randomly asking people at South by, where there's no shortage of people under 30, what their biggest health needs are. And what I've heard is sexual health, physical fitness, and mental health. So Bruce, is there anything else you would add to that list?
To be honest, not really. For me, I think mental health is really, really key, because if you don't have a good, healthy mind, how can you make healthy choices and decisions, right? So for me, I really believe mental health is where it all begins, the genesis of it all. How about you?
So I would add genetic testing on there because I'll just do a short story about myself. I came to Austin and I met with a functional medicine doctor. He ordered blood work and I found out I have a mutation on a gene that I never knew about. And it essentially means that I can't process my B vitamins and folate properly, which can lead to a whole host of issues. And it would completely go undetected my entire life if I hadn't gotten that test done. So I think that if we can integrate genetic testing into our blood work, it would be impactful.
Thank you. Paige?
I would add just kind of general mindfulness, just having some sort of like practice that you engage in to kind of just center yourself every day.
Beautiful. So Bruce, let's start with you. I know you have a big interest in SDG 3, good health and well-being we have over there. What would you say the most important areas of focus? You mentioned mental health, but for today's youth, where would you go with that?
Yeah, so mental health is really, it's so important. I mean, there's so many studies out there that talk about social isolation and people being disconnected. And ultimately, how can we, at a time when we are so connected, still feel lonely and isolated, right? I mean, that is just not healthy. And so mental health is key on so many levels, as I said earlier, about being able to make healthy decisions and choices for our life and for the young ones as well, so they can make healthy eating choices, getting their blood work done as and when they need it, career choices. So I really believe everything stems from there, and that's where a lot of focus really needs to be. And so, SDG 3, which is health, I'm a huge supporter and advocate of that, definitely.
I can tell. So Liv, where do you want young people to focus as far as their health goes?
For me, it's all about lifestyle factors. What we can control today is so important, and we have so much more control than we think between our diet, our movement, meditation. We can implement these practices into our life, and it actually extends so much farther than just from a longevity standpoint. There's a thing called the Compression of Morbidity, which is the time period in which someone has a degenerative or a chronic illness. And so if we can prevent or promote healthier lifestyle factors, then we can actually increase the compression morbidity and press that time a little bit smaller, so that we are living a higher quality of life and having a healthy lifestyle for a longer period of time, which is ultimately everybody's goal, I think.
Compression morbidity, so you heard it here first. Paige, what would you say that you would want people to focus on for their health, young people?
Just lifestyle balance. Don't get so caught up in really any one thing, whether it's work or exercise, or just kind of understand how you can have really a healthy relationship with all those things to live like your core truth, so that you can be really the best version of yourself and put that out into the world, and you're not constantly under stress and duress.
And can I just quickly add
Yeah.
as well? And I think it's so important that we all aim to be the change as well, no matter how young. Like if you're parents, to instill like really good values, and one value is being the change. Because with mental health and the issues, it can start at a very young age, like even just being bullied, whether it's in nursery or school or something like that. And those mental scars, is what I'll call them, will ultimately stay there, and that child will grow into an adult with those scars. You know what I mean? So I think even being mindful of bullying and like online bullying and things like that, we really need to get a handle on that and really turn the tide.
Yeah, we don't necessarily think bullying is a health issue, but it is, because it leads to poorer mental health.
Oh my gosh, yeah, mental
Awesome.
health, eating disorders, identity issues, sexuality issues, like so much.
Absolutely. I mean, as a father, my son's 4. I've already had to deal with that with him. Which is just, I mean, so shocking. But it happens that early. It's something we have to be conscious of that early on in life.
Yeah.
So, Liv, this one is starting with you. Google Health CEO David Feinberg this week here gave a talk that a lot of people have been talking about, that we need to reboot the whole health system around preventive care. So I think that's right up your alley. What kind of things would you like to see us do as a nation and as a globe on preventive care?
Yeah, I think integrative medicine is the future. That's where conventional medicine meets alternative medicine. So obviously there's always a place for pharmaceuticals, but before that, lifestyle factors, like I was saying, plays a huge role in that. So to kind of extend on that, like from a diet perspective, eat whole food rich diet. I know people are always practicing that or preaching that, but really actually do it. Like try to have the majority of your foods follow the 80-20 rule, where 80% of your food that you're intaking is from a whole food source. And then 20%, you could be more relaxed. You can go to restaurants. There are better options out there from a processed food standpoint. And then from a movement perspective, I think that we can choose to exercise more, but not necessarily you have to throw on gym clothes and do a soul cycle class. Just walk more. I choose to walk to the grocery store 10 blocks. And if you're living in a big city, this is easier, but walk instead of, driving your car for 5 minutes. I think that's a really good thing that we can implement when we're young. Also, reusable straws. That's obviously it's not necessarily from our personal health standpoint, but it's from an environmental health standpoint. And if we can start implementing reusable straws, and instead of going and getting a plastic straw from the smoothie shop, then we're making a difference. So I think we need to all focus on an individual level. Lifestyle factors are really important.
Well, you said that. Yeah.
Sorry, very quickly. And
Yeah.
for the urbanites out there, like myself, when you say whole foods,
Yes.
just break that down, because we may hear Whole Foods.
Right.
Right.
Whole
I'm
Foods Market? I know,
go
that's
to a Whole
expensive.
Not an advertisement.
Very good point. Very good point.
So just break that down when you say a whole food.
So for me personally, I'm half Turkish, so I follow a Mediterranean diet, which is essentially a whole food diet. You're focusing on good healthy fats like extra virgin olive oil, avocado. There's no ingredient label because it's only one ingredient. That's what a whole food means.
One ingredient.
So
Love that.
it should only be one ingredient, whatever that food is. So rich in vegetables, rich in fruits, rich in healthy fats, like I said before, rich in protein sources. But from an animal standpoint, we have to think about how the animal was raised. So obviously that leads to other concerns of knowing how to read labels, which is confusing all the time.
So the one ingredient works right there.
Right. So if you think of one ingredient, start with, if you're not eating whole eggs, yolks are really rich in the mineral choline. We need that. Start with eating whole eggs. But then beyond that, think about what the label means. Okay, what's cage-free? What's organic? What should I be buying? These are all so confusing. If you want to go to the next point, go to a free-range chicken. They can go explore, go into the grass. Really, ultimately, we want to get to a pasture-raised chicken if we can, because they are eating crickets and bugs and things like that. So we're getting what the nutrients
lovely.
there. I mean, crickets are so nutrient dense, guys. So anyways, yeah, we really want to focus on those things as well.
Beautiful.
To touch on that, as someone who obviously is making a lot of the food for people in restaurants, it's something that's really important to be aware of as a consumer. Once you understand that on the grocery store level, you actually just have so much more information and questions you can ask when you get into a restaurant, and make better dining out choices when you get there. Because so many people go into restaurants and are like, okay, I see these 5 things listed. I don't know what 3 of them are. Cool, I'll have the chicken. Like that. So many people dine out that way, If you have more knowledge, like Liv said, you can go into a restaurant and say, and really understand what's going on there, and say, okay, well, maybe this restaurant doesn't really align with my ethical and dietary practices anymore. I'm going to make different choices of where my money goes.
That's gold, people. This is a chef talking right here.
Yeah, right?
That's gold.
And what about you? What's your idea for preventive strategies?
Preventive strategies, I would say, is definitely getting out and connecting with the world, right? Because I did a study when I did my MBA, and I had to measure how much time I spent indoors versus being outdoors in the natural habitat. And when I calculated it, I was horrified at how little we spend outside. So getting outdoors, you know what I mean? As you mentioned earlier, like just walking to the grocery store, for example,
A little natural vitamin D.
Yeah, exactly.
I actually have a not that funny of a story to relate to that. But when I opened my last restaurant, I mean, obviously that process is very strenuous for those of you that don't know. But very time consuming to open a restaurant. And about 4 months in, I was so sick, and I was like, okay, it's probably the flu, this, that, or the other sinus infection. And after about 2 months of that, I got really concerned. And so I went to the doctor, and they said, you actually just have a vitamin D deficiency because you haven't been outside. So it can really impact your health that significantly. I mean, like I thought I had mono. That's how bad I felt. I was that lethargic, and it was simply a really, really bad vitamin D deficiency.
Well, and for kids who spend a lot of their time in social media and staring at screens, that's going to be a big prescription for the next generation of kids.
Yeah, definitely. And and one example that I have of that is, with social media, having pictures or posting pictures is like nothing new. I was on the plane over here, I was having a chat with a film producer, and he was just sharing how back in caveman days, and even prior to that, Egyptian days, they would put pictures on walls and paintings, right? So posting images and preserving images is nothing new, but it's our activities around that. Like, I don't know how many Egyptians back in pyramid building days would be painting on the wall while having dinner. Do you know what I mean? Or while being with their wife.
Or just staring at those paintings for hours on end in their bed and not doing anything else at all.
You know what I mean? While they're having a dinner party. So I think we as a people need to honor and respect, digital technology and all the fun things that it brings, but also be so beyond mindful, but militant of putting it away and being with the people that we are currently with.
And ironically,
Absolutely.
the parents in Silicon Valley are really famously limiting screen time, right?
Currently so, yes. Yeah, no, exactly.
Which is quite ironic. So, Paige, as the father of a young child, what are the stressors that you see for kids that might be different than they were for, well, you're still very young, but different for us growing up, different for me growing up? How's that?
Sure. I'll start with kids his age. From that, it's really a media perspective. There are so many things that leak into just the smallest parts of media that kids his age interact with. Be it a little bit of violence or just general overstimulation, just visually. These movies. Let's take any number of like the comic book movies or what have you. Are just so overwhelming, and yet they are geared towards these experiences where kind of parents and adults can enjoy them at the same time, and it's a very lazy form of thinking and parenting. When you say, okay, I'm just going to put this on because it's something that we can both enjoy and I don't have to think about it, as opposed to like really mindfully going outside and engaging in an activity and like actually connecting with your child. And that is such a universal problem right now. For people that are a little bit older, I'll pass it for now.
Well, Liv, let me follow up with you. For people under 30, from ages 5 to 30, what would you say are the biggest stressors that they're facing that are really affecting their mental and physical well-being?
Well, for me, I'm rounding out my 20s, and my 20s have been the most difficult decade. Not that I have a lot to compare it to, but so far, I think that social media can be a powerful tool, and that's what I'm utilizing it for. However, it could also be the opposite, and this compare and despair game going on where you're just constantly looking at other people's lives and seeing where they are and not realizing that it's a highlight reel. Like, everybody's doing this. Everyone's putting out their best foot forward, because why would you put your not best foot forward? So we all want to be, at the end of the day, we all want to be loved and celebrated and connect with other people. So I think that, like we said, having human interactions is so important, and getting off of our phones, like utilizing it for what it is, but also, going to dinner with somebody, meeting with your mom, calling your mom on the phone or to like ask her how she is. Our community is so important, and I think that's like what makes life full.
And and I definitely agree with that. And I think that's where the more mature generation can interact with the younger ones and vice versa, because, the younger generation, this digital world we're living in, that's their normal. So when they see people living these beautiful, curated lives, unless someone maybe sits them down and says to them, this is like curated and edited and only the nice bits put out there, unless they're told that, they may believe that that's people's normal and lives. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the older generation, where we know and can reason and know lives prior to putting it all out there in the digital world, we can share that information. And I think that is really key as well.
Well, when you talk about back to bullying, I'm so struck that if I made a mistake when I was 14, and I made plenty, it's forgotten.
Yeah.
But now it lives forever, and kids can't get away from that. So in terms of making a mistake and having it live forever on social media, that's a lot to have to live with.
Yeah, it's so important that we all are mindful, and especially the younger ones are mindful of, the digital footprint. And the Ad Council have an amazing campaign called Because of You, and if nobody's seen it, I really recommend you Google that. But it's a beautiful ad campaign that really helps with the bullying and just like teenage support ultimately. And very, very quickly, it's a photo shoot. Like, these kids are getting ready to have their yearbook picture taken. And as they're sitting in the chair, the photographer says, I have something to show you quick, right? Yeah. And then as they are fixing the screen, their friend pops up. And then their friend shares a heartfelt story about, because of you, I did X, Y, and Z, or because of you, you helped me through blah, blah, blah. And the person...
So cool.
It's
cool.
a tearjerker.
Wow.
It's a tearjerker.
I see myself crying already.
Yeah. So you
just got a little misty.
Yeah. So you have to see, if you haven't seen it, it's called Because of You by the Ad Council, and it's phenomenal.
And that strikes me as a prescription, though, because any high school kid can go up to any other high school kid or college kid or young adult in there at work and say, because of you, I had a better day.
Yeah,
or because
exactly.
of you, something great happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, to add to that, actually, they've shown that emotions are contagious. So if you're surrounded by negative people, you're gonna be pulled down. So I think social media is also a phenomenal tool to just spread positivity. Like, I think we have, as a society, we overshare sometimes, which could be good and to connect with people through a outlet like social media. But I also think that if you can try to be positive always in your posts and your stories, that you don't know who that can touch. And I have, strangers all the time say, because you were running and threw up a peace sign, you inspired me to do the same, or you made my day better. And I would never think that it would have that impact. It's so simple on my end, but it can make a huge difference on somebody else's end. So I think spreading positivity and trying to stay up.
Well, what I'm hearing us talk about a lot is the tension between being really human and having those one-on-one, carbon-based interactions, and then using social media and digital to also kind of amplify that.
Yeah.
So let's keep talking about positivity in social media and digital. How can we make that not the thing that you get lost in and compare and despair? Mm-hmm. How can we elevate? We are on our phones and on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything else. How can we elevate that for people under 30 in particular?
I really think it is about being the change. So for me personally, I'm very intentional that if I'm at dinner with somebody, I'll put my phone on airplane mode, for example, or turn it upside down. And I will say to the person, if they ask, why are you doing that? I'll say, because I'm here to be with you, spend time with you, and so that's just one of my symbolic acts of doing that. So that's like just one example.
Yeah, and finding that balance, because I utilize my platforms to share things. So obviously I want to capture all this information right now and then share it with the world, because we're helping people right now. But in the same token, if you are having one-on-one interactions, I think that you need be present and be in that moment, because you can get lost really easily. And in terms of social media, I think technology is a really powerful tool, but there's not just social media like Instagram and Twitter. There's things like MyFitnessPal, where you can track your weight loss progress or your steps, and you could also form a community on that platform as well. So there's multiple platforms of technology that inspire a shared vision.
Nice. Yeah. Paige, what would you add to that?
I mean, for me, I spent so much of my career just constantly on my phone. At one point, I was overseeing over 40 restaurants, and so there'd be times where I would go through 3 batteries a day, which was just
that's a lot of batteries.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot, and so I realized, and frankly, I should have realized this a lot earlier, but I have to change my interaction with the world of business and have boundaries, and a lot of that was through my phone. And so I said, okay, well, how can I do that in a purposeful and intentional way every day? And what that was for me was starting my day with meditation every day. I get up, I drink a glass of water, I press play on my coffee machine, and I go back into my room and I read and meditate for 30 minutes every day. And literally barring, my son going to the hospital or something like that, there are no rules or engagements that will break that practice.
And I'd like to add as well, because that's on a personal level that I shared, and sometimes in a business setting about the phone as well. But professionally, I think it's also looking at what changes can we implement. So I'm very fortunate through my job that I'm able to do that. So the campaign I mentioned, I'm happy to say, we are supporting that campaign, with some pro bono support, because it's something that we believe in, and we want to support the Ad Council. We're huge supporters of their work. But equally, whether one is speaking with the facilities team, to say, hey, how can we bring mindfulness into the workplace, for example? Do you know what I mean? How can we maybe, recycle stuff? And why is that important? Because ultimately, if we're killing the planet, that is, again, going to have an impact on our mental health. I mean, that's...
So here's a follow-up for you. Think about the 22-year-old, the 24-year-old at work who may not know how to implement mindfulness and may feel that they don't have the power to do that. How would you counsel them?
I would say it has to start with you first, right? You have to be the change. And I think there's nothing wrong with if you meditate for just 5 minutes, even if you're at work at lunchtime, just say, you know what, I'm going to go take 5 to go meditate. That right there will send a message to people that, I'm stepping away, blah, blah, blah. And it may just plant that seed for somebody else to go and do that as well.
Because everybody preaches meditation and I think it's phenomenal, but I can't, if I'm sitting still, I fall asleep, like every single time. So, everyone's like, oh, this app called Headspace, but it's this, beautiful British woman speaking to me and it's like, it's a lullaby a way, yeah, it's amazing. So I incorporate a moving meditation. And so that's walking and I plug my earbuds in, and Tara Brach is a really great podcast. She does guided meditations and has a very soothing voice. And I just listen to her and do my breath work and connect with nature, I try to get grounded, so I take my shoes off. I want to touch my feet to the earth, and that kind of helps ground me a little bit. So I think sometimes people should know that there is different ways to meditate.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
Don't give up if you can't just sit still for 5 minutes and be silent.
Oh, for sure. It's so personal. I mean, peace is perhaps the most personal thing, I mean, and I think to get back to your question, it's hard to set boundaries. I think honestly, us as people who run businesses, it is more incumbent upon us than our employees and our teams to help them just have those boundaries and have our system set up so that they can lead those lives and don't have to ask us if it's okay to do so. That's our responsibility. It's not theirs.
Well, that brings me, it's a great segue to the next point, which is how do the rest of us and how does society help people? And what I'm struck by is some of the things we're talking about are people who might be at work or might have money or might have privilege. How do we help people who might not have those things achieve better health, better well-being?
So again, for me, it's looking at, I have something called the Brucipus approach. So instead of octopus, I have Brucipus.
The Brucipus?
The Brucipus.
Okay, the Brucipus.
Yeah, so not octopus, Brucipus.
Got it.
All right. So you have the core issue in the middle, and I look at how many other points can I touch with whatever it is I'm solving, right? So for example, one of our global programs at Dentsu is something called The Code, which is a marketing advertising 101 for youth, right? And it's like a workshop that our staff will go and volunteer. But I'm looking for organizations to partner with that deal with food insecurity, because food insecurity affects 1 in 8. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, we've got this great program, but there's all these other issues going on in the world, and one of them is food insecurity. And for those of you who don't know about food insecurity, it's basically, where am I going to get my next meal from?
And how can you find that whole food that Liv was talking about?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking for, as I said, to partner with organizations that are helping feed youth, not just during school time, but during the holidays as well, because there are times when the kid may get fed in school, but not during the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as people in the restaurant business, there is not nearly enough done to solve those problems. It's something, one of the main reasons that I'm really focusing on just not only building restaurants, but building systems and programs that just really help people are issues like that. There are so many different ways that just a good restaurant can help so many people, whether it's volunteer work, taking a portion of proceeds. You have a platform and so many different ways to get better food than everybody else. And you can, and very much just be a middleman to get high quality food to people who don't have it. And I'm a strong believer personally, and I would rather help 100 people totally change their life than 10,000 people have marginal changes in their life.
And that can ripple out. So those 100 people.
Those people
can
are
be
the
your
change,
advocates.
just as we're the change right now.
Beautiful, and that comes back to your point to be the change. Liv, what would you say? How can society help people, youth in particular, who just don't have the privileges that some of the rest of us have?
Yeah, I do believe in education first and foremost, because education, I think, changes consumers' behavior, and behavior drives demand, which then obviously ripples out. But then being a model, like we said, being the change, I want to practice what I preach. And I do know that there are two limiting factors: convenience and affordability. And that's everybody's limiting factor to some degree. So obviously from a whole food standpoint, like restaurants can make a big play into that. Like True Food Kitchen is in Austin here, and it's also in California. Dr. Andrew Weil was one of the founders of it, and it's just fast casual, healthy dining. They have seasonal menus, and it's locally driven when possible. And then they never thought that model would work, but now they have, I think, like 7 locations now all over the country. So I think it's also fairly affordable. I know that there are levels of affordability. I think farmers markets also make that really, it's obviously locally driven. You're supporting the economy, and it is cheaper than going to the grocery store. And also convenience in terms, like Amazon, I think, is changing the world. So if you think about, I don't know, obviously, if they're going to get to the food standpoint, but anything that we're purchasing, and Amazon is affordable. They're trying to drive down prices, being extremely competitive, setting demand. I think that those are some things that are going to be life-altering.
So, Liv, just to follow up on that, one of the things that you shared is, we all have aspirations. And certainly young people I imagine, would say they'd want to be healthy, right? There's nobody who says they want to be unhealthy. But we all make different choices at different times of the day. And if I can share the personal example you shared with me the other day, you said, environmentally, you might use a plastic straw, because you're out somewhere. But then, the other way around, you might use a paper straw, but then at the same time, you might be driving your car, and your carbon footprint is out of balance. So how do we help people reconcile, and especially as young people are starting to learn new habits and ways of being, how do we help them reconcile just living in the world and making choices that may not be ideal every minute?
So it makes me think about Maya Angelou quote, and she said, "Do your best until you know better, and then when you know better, do better." And I think that that can be applied to the majority of the population, and that where education comes into play. But do your best on a daily basis. Make small changes. So if I can bring a reusable straw and put it in my purse when I'm going to a smoothie shop, I'm going to do that. And if I can walk to the grocery store, if it's 10 blocks rather than take a 5-minute drive, I'm going to do that as well. Obviously, there are other things, like a paradoxical thing that I do quite often that I'm still implementing change for myself is I will only eat non-GMO soy products, because we all know GMOs are obviously really harmful to our health. But then the 3 highest genetically modified crops are soy, cotton, and corn. So cotton is what tampons are made out of, but they're readily available everywhere, but not a non-organic option, so you're still absorbing the chemicals that are in that cotton. And I think that they need to have non-organic organic options that you can have at every convenience store. Unfortunately, that's not the case right now, but really great companies are doing subscription models where you can sign up and it'll ship to your door every month. And I think that that's something that we can implement on so many different levels as well, because convenience is a really important thing for everybody.
And Paige, how would you answer that? How can we balance, how can we mitigate some of the less good choices, or how can we help kids mitigate their feelings about some of the less good choices on their journey to making better choices?
Well, I mean, I think I'll approach it from a little bit, I guess, kind of macro view, as far as food systems are concerned. Because that's something that I've spent a lot of time in. There are, so many easy ways to buy things that are just so overprocessed or are non-organic or non-GMO, and it's not about having to be perfect, because not all of us can afford to be perfect. That's a reality, and that's fine, But it is just saying, okay, well, maybe I'm going to shop here instead of here, or just kind of understanding the little differences that you can make in your life and just being purposeful and intentional in making those choices, and maybe being willing to be slightly inconvenienced sometimes. I think that really is a lot of it, of being like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's not the most like efficient way to do this, and that's totally okay, because those little choices make a difference. And just like kind of making peace with that at an internal level, and just saying, okay, cool, like this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to commit to doing this. Really committing every day. I mean, as with anything you want to do, it takes, I believe, 300 reps to turn something into a habit, and then 3,000 reps for it to be unconscious, right? And so if we truly commit to something every day, a couple of years can turn into a lifetime.
And
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Please.
and I strongly do believe, I have a conviction that it's about creating the world that we wish to live in, ultimately, and recognizing that we each play a part in that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, what kind of world do we want to live in, and what am I going to do to contribute to making that world happen? You'd have to be living on another planet if you weren't aware of, climate issues, food insecurities, mental health, and all these issues we're talking about, And if people encounter people that don't know about these things, share them. You know what I mean? It's like the Sustainable Development Goals. If you come across people that don't know about them, share about them. It's like that whole each one teach one, or each one reach one.
I like that.
And live, and thank you. And live by example, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and like we said yesterday, there's chemicals in everything. Like you were like, oh, I don't even think about my makeup having chemicals in it.
I don't.
Or our, candles are endocrine disruptors, or our nail polish is really bad for us. But I think the key is to not overwhelm yourself, because the second that you don't want to lose somebody by overwhelming them with like everything is gonna hurt you.
The world comes to an end.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that sometimes some people take that approach, and I think that it scares people away, and then you get overwhelmed, and then the consumer makes no change whatsoever. So I think
100%.
that I still have candles lighting in my room because they smell really good. If I can do an essential oil diffuser, I'll do that too, and I'll light incense as well. But it's creating that balance, finding that balance, realizing we're human, and until companies can keep up with convenience, obviously there are choices that we have to make. So,
well, also too, I mean, like what do you care about the most? Okay, pick 2 or 3 things, and then actually commit to those things.
Well, and it's interesting because I want to go back to something you said about plastic straws, which is my first reaction was that's about the environment. It's not about health, until I remember that we're imbibing plastic in every piece of seafood we eat and in our water. So now studies say that we're all partly plastic because of that. So every action does inevitably contribute to our human health.
Most definitely. Yeah. So I can expand on that. From a food perspective, so I love tuna, but tuna is high in mercury, and I guess this is beside the point. But another thing that you can do to kind of rid heavy metals from your system are also food choices. So if you want to eat tuna fish on a weekly basis, you can also have cilantro, and cilantro releases heavy metals from your system. So I was just thinking about that, and I was like, you know what, people should know that.
Thank you. There you go. Each one teach one.
Each one teach one.
I actually didn't know that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
There you go. So, and now you're going to tell other people. So,
absolutely.
And amplify. So, how can we use either digital media or each other to spread the word? Now, you have a 4-year-old. How is that 4-year-old going to learn healthier habits? Obviously, from you and his mom, but what about from the greater world? What can the rest of us do to help teach little children about healthier habits?
I think it all comes through action, I mean, again, like I stated earlier, just take the time to go out and do something, show them the way to live, right? It is very much a do as I do, not as I say. I mean, also do as I say, like, please listen to me, I'm your father, right? But
does that still work?
But yeah, exactly. Well, hit and miss. Yeah, exactly. He's a good kid. I'm very lucky. But I think just making the time to show them how to interact with the world, and say, okay, we're going to go outside X amount of hours every week. When we go shopping, we're going to do it this way. If we're going to go see a movie or something like that, this is the type of movie we're going to see. These are the type of books we're going to read. Okay, we're going to actively seek new new things to engage us mentally. Like I'm teaching him how to play chess now,
At 4?
At 4,
Love
yeah.
it.
Lucky
And
kid.
Those little things make a huge difference, I mean, like, not to say that, I am the smartest person in the world, but, those are small things that we can teach our kids, those things that we can pass on, to just be conscious of those things and not just say, okay, well, he does this at this age, blah, 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 his friends are doing it, whatever, like, be aware that you're an individual and that you bring very special things to the table. Give those things to your child, it is the greatest gift that we can give them, is the best parts of ourselves, in hopes that they can be better than us.
Beautiful. Did either of you guys want to comment on that, or?
Yeah, just really quick. I think obviously education policy should change, but I think that's the long game. I've never had a nutrition class in school, in elementary school. I think it was a blip in my biology class. So I would have loved to have learned more about how food is affecting our body. Also, like, sex education is really lacking too. So I think that we need to really educate our youth about all of the implications of sexual health as well as nutritional health. So another thing that we can do today is obviously from a parental standpoint, and I'm not a parent yet, but I do know that my mom raised me. She was really conscious of, like, the food that we put into our bodies. We weren't allowed to have fruit roll-ups or anything in our lunch boxes, and I was always so jealous of my friends' lunch boxes, and they would get peanut butter fluff
Compare and
sandwiches.
despair.
And yeah, exactly. We're all FOMOing. But that really made a huge impact on how I eat now, and I'm conditioned to eat the way that I am. I wasn't allowed to have fast food growing up, so I don't crave fast food anymore. I never craved fast food. It's not even something that I think about, but I think that parents have much more of an impact than they think, and rather than appease their child in that moment, which I'm so happy that my mom didn't, because now it's not even a thought. And I think that parents should take a little bit more responsibility when it comes to that.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to any of that.
Okay.
That's all golden. Right?
But you, but you do have something to add on another topic, which is how can we listen better to young people as they learn healthier habits and maybe help us? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's about always being curious in the world, no matter what age you are. I like to use the analogy of a rose wouldn't grow in the Antarctic, right? Because it's just a different climate. And I just believe that we as people need to be in the right environment to grow to our full potential. And what that means is always being curious about our environment, you know what I mean? And so a lot can be learned from the younger generations and vice versa. So if we're always in a state of being curious, then we're always in a state of growing, ultimately. Because that is what life really is about, whether we like it or not. We are always growing human beings, we are always aging and, processing.
Very well said. I think something, and it actually ties us on to what you said earlier, is not isolating ourselves. Because you can become very closed-minded through isolation. And that can just be as simple, it doesn't mean you're just locked in a closet in the dark. It can mean that you just kind of hang out with people that have very similar viewpoints all the time, and you never go outside that social bubble, right?
Right.
And so just to be open to having a conversation with someone who you may not agree with on everything, but you can see the other side of the street and understand that you're both human beings, that's a real necessary thing in this world.
Yeah.
And that's going to add to, I think, to our collective mental health, not just young people.
1,000%.
Leave anything about it. We talked a little bit about this intergenerational idea of creating better health. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, millennials are really informed, and we're, I think, changing demand. Like, there's the green juices are on the rise, avocado toasts are on the rise, but getting my dad to want to have a green juice in the morning is really difficult. And same thing, our parents are already conditioned to be the way they are. So I obviously would love to tell my dad to rub CBD lotion on his hand because he just had surgery on it and he's in a lot of pain. But he thinks that CBD is going to, get him high, and that's not the case. We live in a day and age where things are changing, and I honestly, for myself personally, I'm just living by example and hoping that they pick up on something, and slowly but surely my mom's like, oh, I heard CBD is good for anxiety. And I'm like, yeah, it's actually really good for anxiety. She's like, I'm thinking about taking it. Do you know where I should go? And I'm like, oh, of course, Mom. Yes, I actually have a brand, right now. So you really have to I really just try to share as much as I can and hope that they watch my Instagram stories.
I'll bet they do.
Yeah, and I think it's also to add on to that, it's about asking questions as well that will intrigue them. Because like for your dad, you could ask the question, you know, like what's important to you? Is it being in pain or not being in pain? Do you know what I mean? Like what kind of world do you want to live in? Do you want to live in the world of pain in your hand or a pain-free world? You know, because I think, you know, we can ask questions to help intrigue people, and once they're intrigued, now the door is open now to come to share that knowledge.
Yeah.
You know.
Funny story, actually. I mean, a little off topic, but so I've been CrossFitting for about 6 years, and my parents always been like, "You're insane! Like, why do you do that?" You know, and they're kind of right. I mean, in that regard, you know. But about 6 months ago, my dad bought a rower, which is, a very popular thing in that style of exercise, and says, "Hey, like, I really want to use one of these things." And I said, "Well, can I help you with that?" You know, and it started with a rower, and now it's push-ups and squats and doing things to strengthen his back. I mean, he's 70 years old, and to see him, he played a Division I college sports and then just like pretty much didn't exercise for 30 years, and he's fully re-engaged in being a very healthy version of himself now, and it's awesome to see. I mean, not to give myself any credit for that. There's the choices he's making every day, you know. But the fact is that
you're there inspiring him.
Well, and he taught me how to play basketball, which is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given. You know, it's something I can take anywhere and do anything, and it gives me peace. You know, so just to be able to give that back to him in some way is beautiful.
So ultimately, what I'm hearing us saying as we wrap up, good health is a really human issue. And it's a human issue we can all connect on, both individually as we be with each other in engagement, as well as digitally. And you've all dedicated your careers, and in some cases your lives, to helping others. So if you were to talk to everybody listening and watching today, what's the one piece of advice, we'll start with Paige, that you would give to everybody listening today on how they can do the same thing to create better health in their own lives and in others?
This is not my idea, but I was at the Wisdom 2.0 conference.
Conference? Sorry.
The Wisdom 2.0 conference
Okay. Wisdom 2.0.
2 weeks ago, I guess last week. And I heard one of the most impactful quotes. It was actually from Jay Shetty, and he said that it's really, really important to understand this simple truth, right? You can't be anything in the world, you know. Like I'm never going to be 7 feet tall. That's okay, you know. But we can all be all of ourselves, you know.
We can all.
And just to know that, and just be with that, and sit in peace with that, and then live that.
Liv, what would you like to tell everybody? How can they be the change in the world?
Well, this isn't probably the most popular answer, but I think personal responsibility is huge in our world. The older I get, the unfortunate truth is no one's looking out for us. I mean, obviously what we're doing right now is, but the government isn't, you know, and so we really have to take personal responsibility for our own lives and educating ourselves and really diving down deep in the information. If you don't agree with what your doctor is telling you, then go see another doctor. Go approach, you know, different integrative medicine practices or alternative medicine. I mean, there's so many different ways of living this life. And I think that if we can just explore and educate ourselves from a personal standpoint and realize it really is up to us, like how our life is going to be, I think that's what we should do.
That's a beautiful answer. Bruce, how about you?
I would say be the change, ultimately, you know, not only for your life, but for the lives of another. So really be the change. And that really looks like reach one and teach one. So I would say reach one, teach one, always.
So Paige, Liv, Bruce, SDG 3, Youth and Wellness in the 21st Century. Thank you guys for listening. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys.
And thank you for moderating.
Yeah, thank you. You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Thank you.